From the Arizona Daily Star and Tucson.com, this is the Wildcast.
Hello, welcome to another episode of the Wildcast podcast. Justin Spears here with Michael Lev starting off the week. Arizona coming off their loss to the number 12 ranked Oregon Ducks. Now they turn their attention to the Washington Huskies in Seattle on Saturday. Tough game ahead because the Huskies ranked team, but they have two straight losses, including a road loss to ASU in which nobody predicted to happen. A lot of us thought that Washington would go in and thump ASU. So now Arizona really has their work cut out for them, facing a Washington team looking to get their season back on track. But let's talk about what happened against the Oregon Ducks, Lev. So the Wildcats, they had an opportunity right there in the beginning. And we'll ask more about, or we'll dive into your mailbag questions later on in the podcast. Sorry, let me do my hosting duties to remind everyone that we are doing our Monday mailbag. But Lev, I think that my two biggest takeaways from Arizona's loss to Oregon was, man, they had a golden opportunity to go up 10-0 early on. And who knows the pace of the game after that, because the Wildcats go up by a couple of scores. You have to be feeling pretty good about Arizona's chances, at least hanging around in the game. But just kind of a buzzkill with that fumble there on the goal line. I know that they scored a field goal on the following possession, but 10-0 is a lot different than 3-0. So that kind of, like I said, it was a buzzkill. It totally changed the pace of the offense after that. And then the defense. Once again, it's the damn defense that's Arizona's biggest kryptonite. Yards allowed, especially on the ground. So, Lev, you actually had opportunity to look back on this game. What did you take away?
Yeah, I agree with you about the beginning of the game. I didn't end up writing about that in my 5 takeaways, but it was a note that I jotted down. I mean, they did have a great opportunity to go up, let's say, 10-0. In that game. And what that could do is give you a boost of confidence, right? It gets the crowd like really engaged in the game. And maybe, just maybe, it changes Oregon's offensive approach a little bit. You know, not that they were having trouble passing the ball either, but we knew coming in that the biggest mismatch was Oregon's rush offense versus Arizona's rush defense. That turned out to be true. It was a major problem. Arizona had 0 tackles for losses in this game,
That's
which
concern.
Is a major concern. And I think it's the first time that's happened since like 2011.
Yeah.
So it's been a minute. So to me, the issues on run defense are multi-pronged. Not getting enough penetration from the defensive line. When guys do get through, linebackers aren't making plays. And then, you know, when defensive backs are your leading tacklers, when Jackson Turner, who played about 2.5 quarters, has 13 tackles in the game, that's not great. I mean, he's the free safety. You know, he's the last line of defense, and he's having to come up and make a bunch of plays. They did make one lineup change on their depth chart anyway. It looks like Jacob Manu has leapfrogged Colby Cage at that will linebacker position. I said in my 5 takeaways and on Twitter as well that I think DJ Warnell deserves a chance to play maybe at that star position, which is where he started out in spring. Then they moved him to safety. I'm not sure this is the best matchup to make that move because Washington has a really good wide receiving core, and they're probably going to try to spread Arizona out. So the tweak you might want to make for this particular game is to put another cover guy out there. I don't know if Isaiah Rutherford's going to be healthy enough to do that. Maybe it's time to break out Ephesians Prysock or Takario Davis to give a 3-corner dime type of look. But yeah, the biggest problem that Arizona had against Oregon was the Ducks averaging 9.9 yards per play on first down. That's 0.1 yards away from getting a first down on every, on average on first down plays.
You feel pretty good about yourself on second down.
Yeah, you do. You really do. If 2nd and 1 is like the average second down, yeah. And Jed referenced that during his news conference on Monday. Like, it's really hard to play defense. It's that whole ahead of the chains, behind the chains thing that we talked about earlier in the season. Oregon was ahead of the chains the entire game, or they were just moving the chains on any given play to the next series of downs. And it is really, really hard to play defense against a really good team. The other thing I would say Justin, is if you listen to Jed's comments today, he's got a lot of like kind of long-term perspective on things.
Yeah.
Like there was a lot of just like, hey, we're not where Oregon is at right now. Like they've been recruiting at this high level for 5 to 7 or however many years it's been, you know, and Jed and his staff are just getting started.
Yeah.
And I this is something that I did write about in my 5 takeaways, which everyone should check out, either on the Wildcaster app or Tucson.com. Like, it's really hard in the immediate aftermath of a loss to have that kind of perspective because everyone is frustrated and angry, and you know it's like fire everybody and bench everybody. But Arizona's 3-3, and they were 1-11 last year, and people thought they were going to go 0-3 in the non-con coming into this thing, and they are sitting at 500, which is not a terrible place to be. Yeah. And Jed pretty much said that too today. He's like, I'm okay with where we're at, and he has mentioned it so many times. We are building this thing, right? They are in the process of building, and it takes time to build it up. There are no quick fixes. There are no magic solutions. No, it's not. I mean, basketball, how many players on a roster? 13?
You get 13 scholarship players. You can literally change a basketball team overnight. 2 or 3 studs, right? Maybe 2 studs. Maybe 1 even. If it's that great of a player, and that can change everything. Yeah. And you can't do that in football. Look, they've done it on offense. Quarterback play is better. Receivers are better. Running backs are pretty good. They're scoring a lot more than they were. You can't fix everything in one offseason. So give the staff a little bit of time. Yeah, well, I noticed that too after the game. A lot of Arizona fans voiced their opinions and frustrations about losing and just getting smacked by Oregon. They kind of felt like they had the carpet pulled from underneath them, just in a sense that they sold this game. Hey, show out to Arizona Stadium. Let's pack the house. Let's get a sellout. And they did. And then they get smacked. And so Arizona fans are frustrated, like, okay, you guys have been telling us to go out to a game. We finally show out. And then you guys put up this kind of performance. So I kind of understand fans' frustration in that aspect, but also fans need to understand that the expectations going into this year, I mean, Lev, you know this just as well as I do. You ask any like generic Arizona fan, what are your expectations for this year? How many wins? People will probably say anywhere from 2 to 5, right? Well, they're at 3 right now at the halfway point of the season, and they have a couple of wins in sight, in my personal opinion. So, in my opinion, I don't think that anything has really changed with this team. They are who they are. You can't change this thing overnight, and it's kind of good news, bad news. Like, good news, they're 3-3, which is way better than 0-6 last year. Bad news is the defense is still bad. Good news for the defensive side of the ball is that they have more takeaways this year than last year. Bad news, yards are still being surrendered in a significant amount. So I think that Arizona fans, they have to be thinking, okay, let's just get one milestone at a time. Let's get these little goals. And then eventually the big goal, which I think won't happen until maybe year 3 of this thing, because I think this year's year 1. Next year will be year 2. I think when T-Mac's a third-year guy, and you have Kean Burnett and all these other guys that they got from 2022, once they're all third-year players and eligible to go to the NFL draft, that's when you're going to see Arizona really take flight. But for right now, they're playing against the upper echelon of the Pac-12, and the results are kind of what we expected it to have. Yeah, no, it's not a huge surprise, what the outcome, I think, of that game was. I think people are, and they should be more disappointed in the Cal game. That was a winnable game. Cal has not had an offensive outburst like that against anyone else that they've played. So that one to me is way more disappointing than the outcome we saw on Saturday. And look, the staff they're working on fixing these problems. If you look at their commits for 2023 so far, they've got 5 guys who are listed as defensive linemen, 1 guy listed as a linebacker, 6 guys who are listed as defensive backs. And does that include like the athletes? 2 athletes who are also DBs supposed to play defense, right? Gavin Hunter. So that's a total of 14 out of the 19. Yeah. Right. If you include the athletes who I think they're projecting to defense, doesn't include the silent commits either. I think at least one of those guys is a defensive player. Yeah. So they obviously they can tell. They know what is needed
And they focused, mainly on offense in this last class because the offense was really bad. And they tried to patch things together on defense. It's hard to do in one fell swoop. I would say pretty much impossible. So that's what we're seeing.
And we also have to factor in defensive coaching changes, not overall, like not the entire staff, but defensive coordinator, the head honcho, is a new guy. And not only is it a new face, but it's a guy who's never been a defensive coordinator to begin with. Like, this is Johnny Nanson's first go-around as a defensive coordinator. There are going to be some growing pains. There are going to be some kinks along the way that I think Arizona fans need to maybe give him a little bit of a break. And not only is it a first-year defensive coordinator who's never done this before, Lev, but he's playing 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds against a college team that has 20-year-olds. So.
Yeah, no, I agree. And look, Johnny's under fire right now from the fan base, for sure. They're not happy with the way things have gone. They saw signs of progress last year under Don Brown, who, decided to go back home and take the UMass head coaching job. Can't blame him for that. We discussed this last week. I did kind of a side-by-side breakdown. It was before the Oregon game. And sort of a wash, looking at last year's defense versus this year's defense. Just depends on what you value the most. Obviously, things are not trending in a positive direction in that regard. But to me, and I think they mentioned this when Johnny was hired, like, they obviously want him to coordinate the defense. They believe in the system and the style that he plays. But like, if you're kind of assessing, like, what is his biggest strength? What is the biggest asset that he brings to a program? I mean, it's recruiting, right? Like, he's been a great recruiter on the West Coast, and I think that will be reflected in the types of players that they are able to get and bring in here. And a point that I made in 5 takeaways was everyone bagged on Jed Fish's play calling last year. They're not mentioning it so much this year because he has better players.
Yeah.
Let's see what happens when Johnny has better players.
Yeah. Excuse me. So something I noted after the game, yards surrendered by Arizona so far this season, 2,584 total. They're averaging 107.6 yards per quarter. That's per quarter, 107 per quarter for the defense allowing. That's very concerning. So how do they do it, Lev? Or is it just they are who they are, and the next month is just going to really be terrible for Arizona fans when they watch these games?
Well, I mean,
because you got Michael Penix in Washington offense,
man,
USC.
You've got Michael Penix. You've got here's the next 4 quarterbacks they face: Michael Penix, Caleb Williams, Cameron Rising, Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Oof. There's not a break to be found.
Cameron Ward too.
Yeah, Cameron Ward coming up, and then whoever ASU is going to play. So what can you do to get better? I mean, you can try different personnel. Okay, I don't think you can radically change the scheme. So you can try to play some different players. They're doing that with the will linebacker spot this week. We'll see if that makes a big difference. The other thing is get some turnovers. You only need a handful of stops in the course of a game if your offense is playing well. I mean, a lot of these Pac-12 games, they're high-scoring games, back-and-forth games. Look at North Dakota State, right? The final score was, 31-28?
Yeah.
And Arizona's defense was getting gashed for 3 quarters plus until basically the end of the game. The last 2 possessions for North Dakota State, Arizona got stops, and they won the game. So, I mean, we're not asking them to, suddenly become the best defense on the West Coast. You're asking them to get a handful of stops over the course of the game. How about turn some of these trips in the red zone into field goals? You don't even have to get a turnover. To me, that's a win. And they haven't been getting those wins lately, and that's reflected in the outcome of some of these games.
I think for the time being, again, you said that reinforcements are on their way in this 2023 class. And then the younger guys this year are all going to have a year or 2 under their belts, and Arizona's defense is going to be much better. I think Arizona might have to Big 12 this thing, Lev. I think they might have to win games like 49-45 or 45-42. Now it's going to be really tough because you're going up against Utah's defense and USC's defense, and Washington State has a really good defense this year. They're one of the best in the Pac-12. So the defenses they're facing are going to be huge challenges. But, man, you might have to really double down on this whole offense thing and make sure that you guys are crisp, because I think at this point, the way that the defense is holding up this year, I think Arizona, if they have any shot at going to a bowl game this year or getting close to it, they might have to win games in the 40s, maybe even the 50s.
Yeah, I could definitely see the Washington game and the USC game playing out that way, and that sort of being Arizona's only chance to win those games. Now, for that to happen, Jaden Delore needs to play better than he did on Saturday. I asked him about some of the fundamental issues, footwork, etc. Jed seemed a little perplexed. He's like, he was rushing some throws, hurrying, half rollouts in situations where he should have, stepped up in the pocket. So they'll probably go to work this week. One thing we've seen, on some of those issues, one thing we've seen from Jaden, like there was the game where he didn't run, and then the next week he ran really well, right? And he's made then the Cal game, he forced the ball downfield. What does he do the next week? He utilizes his checkdowns really well. So we've seen him learn over the course of the season, self-correct, and I would imagine that we'll see a sharper quarterback coming up in a place that he's very familiar with.
The scene of the crime, right?
That's right.
Where he planted the flag in the Apple Cup. Mm-hmm. Love it. All right, Lev, we'll talk more about Arizona versus Washington later on in the week, but let's go ahead and hit up our Twitter mailbags. Thanks to all of our listeners who have submitted your questions for the week. Our first one comes from Andy Blaho. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Andy asks, when might Arizona announce renovations to Arizona Stadium? What do you think they'll consist of, and what do you think the stadium needs? Other programs across the country have started or announced similar projects. I think that maybe the west side of the stadium is Dave Hickey's white whale that he wants to tackle, because, that's a big project. One entire side of the stadium, and it's the side that also has the press box and the media stuff, and that's a huge project. I think that's probably the big one that Arizona's going to focus on here in the next couple of years. So yeah, keep an eye on the west side of the stadium, and then possibly maybe even upper deck on the east side. But I think west side is probably most important. Yeah,
I think I don't know if they had officially announced anything or they were on the verge of announcing a plan, but then the pandemic happened. Yeah. Right? And that really derailed that particular project. You're talking about probably over $100 million needed to make those changes that they want to make, especially to the west side of the stadium. And all of a sudden, revenue dried up in a major way. So they had to recalibrate those plans. They had to do a lot of budget tightening, and that put all of that stuff on hold. And I know they would like to do it. I don't know what the timetable is to do it. It'd be nice if there was some super rich mega donor who could step up and provide a large chunk of funding that's needed. I think in a dream world, they would pretty much start from scratch, and do something like what I think Northwestern is doing, like a more modern stadium with shade. It would be great to have some sort of shade structure so that you maybe could play earlier in the day and actually have people show up. But none of that's really realistic right now. So I think definitely the west side, and I think it's going to be at least a couple years before we see any of that.
Well, one of the biggest Amazon warehouses on the West Coast is in Tucson, Lev. So maybe Dave Heeking could just hit up Jeff Bezos. And Arizona has their first title sponsor for a stadium.
You think Amazon's going to... Well, hey, maybe if Amazon picks up the Pac-12 to some degree, then there's a little bit of sort of synergy.
Look at that.
There. We're brokering deals here.
Call it the Big
on the
Prime.
Wildcast. Oh, Big Prime.
The Big Prime.
Like it.
All right, let's go to our next mailbag submission. Movie Bear Jim. Love that name. Movie Bear Jim asks, here's one. What's one thing that you could/would do to improve our defense for the rest of the season's games with the current players?
Yeah.
Maybe blitz more.
It's difficult.
And it's challenging, man. I really don't know.
I would play DJ Warnell, maybe starting, after this week. Said matchup wise, I'm not sure it's the best, but I've liked what I've seen from him. Really good on special teams. Seems like a good tackler. The reason he was moved off of that star position was he's not quite as good in coverage as some of the other guys, but Gunnar Maldonado's struggling.
He is
right now. He's had a lot of missed tackles. He's not been defending the pass that well. So that's a move that you could make. Let's see what Manu looks like. But it's tough at that linebacker position. And we went into the season concerned about that spot. And those concerns have been justified. I mean, Jerry Roberts is the only guy who's got any semblance of experience. I still think he's playing too many snaps. He's a good player around the line of scrimmage. I don't think he's a great space player. And then after that, who do you got? 2 converted safeties, and Colby Cage and Eamon Allen, who are undersized. And then another undersized guy, and Jacob Manu, who I think is going to be a really good player. But right now, he's probably 205 pounds, 210 at the most. And that's just not linebacker sized guys. I don't know what the deal is with Malik Reed. It's something that we've sort of all had on our list to ask about and haven't asked about yet. He was a guy on paper who looked like he was going to step right in there at that will linebacker position. Safety wise, I mean, you're not going to bench Jackson Turner or Christian Young, right? I think you could definitely sprinkle in a little bit more of the young defensive linemen. I've liked what I've seen from Ty Youngalole and Russell Davis when they've been in there. They're kind of like, they just have like tons of energy, and you can tell they're like super aggressive, and they just kind of overrun. They just fly into the backfield a lot, whether they're supposed to or not. But you can see the traits that attracted Arizona in the first place. So those are some possibilities. I
look at some other defensive players, and I think, could a position change be what they need? Could Colby Cage possibly go back to playing safety, or is he in too deep at the linebacker spot? Because he's put on some weight, right, in order to play it. But he's not bad in coverage. I mean, he still needs to work on tackling. So could he go back to playing safety, maybe play Christian Young's spot?
Yeah,
could Christian Roland Wallace? I mean, we've talked about this for the last couple of years. I mean, he's built like a safety. He could be great at safety.
He could. Unfortunately, he's also far and away their best cover corner. So
true.
So taking him out of that spot, it's like trying to plug all the holes in the dam. That just might open up another one.
I don't think that would be a project maybe for this year, but I mean, next year when you have Ephesians Prysock and Takario Davis coming up, and he decides to come back.
If he decides to come back.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Big
he will.
if.
We'll see.
But yeah, I don't know. I think maybe Colby Cage, maybe going back to safety, because, I mean, he's a good player. And I think he can make an impact for this Arizona team, but he's definitely been struggling recently. All right, let's go to the next Twitter mailbag question from Tyler Cole. Tyler asked, the takeaways are better this year versus last year, and the numbers show it's a toss-up between 2021's defense and this season's, but the eye test and what I see on the field, it feels like this season's is almost worse. Am I right? Is it the worst we've seen this century? Man, I don't know. I mean, Jed Fish said in his press conference, like, hey, we got spanked by San Diego State last year. Colorado, too, lost 34-0, and look at what Arizona did this year. I don't know. That's really tough. I mean, takeaways is a huge thing, and it's much improved, but yards allowed, I don't know what the exact numbers are from the first 6 games last year, but I'm sure it's probably on pace to be very similar, or this year might even be worse. I don't know. But I think overall, though, the defense, the players, with a whole year under Tyler Owens' strength and conditioning program, they just have better dudes on that side of the ball. They added Hunter Echols from USC, who's a very formidable pass rusher and a guy at that cap position. So in terms of the eye test, Lev, I say that this year's defense is definitely a little bit better than last year's.
I know what he's saying.
I get it. No, I totally understand.
I do get it, because it felt like last year that the defense kind of kept them in the game a lot while the offense was struggling. But let's not let's not do revisionist history here, okay? It's not like it was like the best defense in the country or something. I know they shaved about 100 yards off per game, which was impressive. But if you look at, let's say, touchdown to interception ratio, okay, opponents had 25 touchdowns. Arizona had only 4 interceptions. That's not good. If you look at average yards per pass play, it was 8.1 yards last year. That's not good. Were they better in certain regards? Yes. But they weren't amazing. You know, let's not overinflate how good the 2021 defense is when we're looking at the 22 squad. I agree, you know, I don't think it's trending in a good direction right now. They need some positive things to happen, and maybe the turnovers that they got early sort of masked some of the issues that they're having now. But I still have faith in Johnny Nansen. I think he knows what he's doing. Like you said, there might be some growing pains. But you know, let's give it some time. Let's see how things look a year from now.
Random thought. Whatever happened to Anthony Solomon?
Yeah, that's another
transfer from Michigan.
I know.
I mean, he was getting some reps in at the 2s during spring ball. I thought he might make a difference.
Special teams.
I don't know. Malik Reed ain't Anthony Solomon.
At least he's playing. Malik Reed isn't even on special teams.
Yeah.
So you look. You know, when you look around the Pac-12, UCLA has done an amazing job in the transfer portal. It seems like they hit on almost every guy that they bring in. They brought in those twin defensive ends, right? They brought in the dude from Washington, a great pass rusher, Bobo, the wide receiver, Chip Kelly and his staff. Great job with their assessments on those players. But in general, you're not going to hit on 100% of the even in the portal, even quote unquote known entities. Anthony Solomon didn't play on defense at Michigan. And obviously there's a reason for that. Malik Reed was really young. I think he had played 1 season at Wisconsin and maybe was just a special teamer there. So, you know, it's something of a leap of faith.
Yeah.
And I think you'll hit on a higher percentage in the portal, but it's still not going to be 100%. And some of those guys haven't panned out.
This kind of goes along with what we were just talking about earlier. This comes from Joseph 52. And Joseph, appreciate you, Joe. You've been submitting questions every single week, so we do greatly appreciate that. He says, can we all come together and assess at least 80% of the defensive faults to Nansen? Last year, they debatably had worse pieces, but Dr. Blitz seemed to have a better idea on how to keep us in games. Sure, there's the lack of turnovers, but I'd rather have that than what we have now.
Yeah, it's pretty much the point that we just addressed. And 80%,
yeah,
that's a lot. But he is the one in charge of that side of the ball, so you'd have to say at least 50%, right? It's been bad, and I don't really think they were that bad against North Dakota State. I mean, again, that was a weird team that played a system that you never see. They were so relentless, and they got stops at the end, and they won the game. The Cal game was really bad. Okay, that game was really bad that is not an Oregon level offense, and they just allowed Jaden Ott to go off. They had no sacks in that game against a really, had been a porous offensive line. And then Oregon's just really good.
Yeah.
Oregon is really good. I mean, weren't you impressed with Bo Nix?
I was.
In that game, he looked like a stud.
Running, passing the ball. He looked like an NFL quarterback. And I never thought I'd ever say that about Bo Nix.
I thought the same thing when I rewatched the game. I'm like, this might be an NFL player.
Yeah.
I don't think he's a first round pick, but I think he's draftable. He certainly has the physical traits to do it.
He'll be one of those 5th round backup quarterbacks. Go to the Giants or something like that, and then take over for Daniel Jones halfway through next year.
I heard there was this thing called Bad Bo Nix. Bad Bo Nix did not fly from Eugene to Tucson.
No, it was
only good Bo Nix.
It was Bo Nose Nix. All right, well, thank you for all who submitted questions. Again, Arizona 3-3. Not again. It's 500 football, yes, but I'd say stay patient, Arizona fans. All of a sudden, my Twitter comments, I don't know about you, Lev, but it seems like a lot of Arizona fans are like assume that Arizona could possibly win the Rose Bowl this year because expectations change. Hey, they're 3-2. They're feeling good about themselves, and they got a slice of humble pie from Oregon. And now a lot of Arizona fans are kind of frustrated. I'm like, well, stay tight because this is a football program. This is not going to change in 1 year. This is going to be a couple-year project. And right now, Arizona's in year 1.
Win-loss, win-loss, win-loss.
You take that compared to what you've experienced the last few years.
Will that pattern continue? It'll be tough. It'll be really tough in this upcoming stretch. And we'll talk a little bit more about the Washington game in our next pod on Thursday.
Absolutely. And with that being said, subscribe to the Wildcast on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you listen to podcasts. And also be sure to find all of our content on Arizona Wildcats football on Tucson.com and the Wildcaster app, which you could download for free off the App Store and Google Play.